The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grand Harbor Hotel's penthouse suite as Marcus Chen stood motionless, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. At 38, he had built Chen Technologies from a college dorm room idea into a global empire worth $47 billion. Tonight, he looked like a man who had lost everything that mattered. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency board meeting had ended 3 hours ago. The hostile takeover attempt by Meridian Corp had failed, but barely. Marcus had saved his company, but the betrayal cut deeper than any business loss ever could. His longtime business partner and closest friend, David Kim, had orchestrated the entire scheme. 20 years of friendship, dissolved in a conference room full of lawyers and bitter accusations. "You were never my friend," David had said during their final confrontation. "You were just a stepping stone to real power. I'm tired of being in the shadow of Marcus Chen, the golden boy who thinks his money makes him untouchable." The words echoed in Marcus's mind as he loosened his Italian silk tie. He had built walls around himself for so long that when the one person he trusted most struck at his heart, there was no defense. Success had isolated him in a tower of achievements. But tonight, that tower felt more like a prison. His phone buzzed incessantly on the marble countertop. Reporters, investors, board members, all wanting statements about the failed takeover. Marcus switched it off and poured himself 3 fingers of 25-year-old scotch. The amber liquid burned, but not as much as the realization that he had no one to call, no shoulder to lean on, no genuine friend to process this betrayal with. The penthouse, with its panoramic city views and museum-quality art, felt suffocating. Marcus grabbed his leather jacket and headed for the elevator. He needed to disappear, to be somewhere no one knew his name or his net worth. As the elevator descended, he made a decision that would change everything. "I need a room," Marcus told the night desk clerk at the Harbor Inn, a modest 3-star hotel 15 miles from downtown. He had driven aimlessly for an hour, finally stopping at the first place that looked ordinary, unremarkable, forgettable. The young clerk looked up from his computer screen, taking in Marcus's expensive clothes and the Lamborghini visible through the glass doors. "Certainly, sir. We have several suites available." "No suites, just a regular room, something simple." Marcus pulled out his wallet, then hesitated. His Platinum American Express would immediately identify him. Instead, he reached for the emergency credit card he kept for situations requiring anonymity. "The name is Michael Park." The clerk processed the reservation without question, handing over a key card to room 237. "Elevators to your right, sir. Ice machine on each floor. Continental breakfast starts at 6. Marcus took the key and headed upstairs. Room 237 was everything the penthouse wasn't. A modest double bed with a floral comforter. A small television mounted to the wall. A tiny bathroom with standard fixtures. For the first time in hours, Marcus felt like he could breathe. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of David's betrayal. They had met during their freshman year at Stanford. 2 ambitious kids from immigrant families who dreamed of changing the world through technology. They had been roommates, study partners, each other's best man at their respective weddings. When Marcus's marriage to socialite Amanda Whitmore had crumbled 3 years ago, David had been the one to help him pick up the pieces. "Power corrupts," David had said that night, his voice cold with calculation. "But you were already corrupted by the time we graduated. You just hid it better than most." The accusation stung because Marcus wondered if there was truth in it. Had success changed him? Had he become the cold, calculating businessman that tabloids often portrayed? He thought about the last time he had a genuine conversation with someone who wasn't an employee, a board member, or trying to get something from him. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He couldn't remember. A soft knock at the door interrupted his brooding. Marcus glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was nearly midnight. Who would be knocking at this hour? "Housekeeping," came a gentle voice through the door. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I noticed the light under your door and wanted to make sure everything was all right with your room." Marcus opened the door to find a woman in her early 30s wearing the hotel's standard housekeeping uniform. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and carried a small basket of supplies. Her name tag read Elena. "I'm fine," Marcus said automatically, then realized how unconvincing he must sound. His eyes were red from exhaustion and emotion, his expensive shirt wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. Elena studied his face with the careful attention of someone accustomed to reading people's needs. "I don't mean to intrude, Mr. Park, but you look like you could use some tea. I was just finishing my rounds and noticed you might be having a difficult night." The simple kindness in her voice nearly undid him. When was the last time someone had offered him tea, not because they wanted something from him, but because they noticed he was hurting? "That's very kind, but I don't want to keep you from your work," Marcus managed. "My shift doesn't end for another hour, and sometimes a cup of tea can make the difference between a sleepless night and finding some peace." Elena's smile was warm and genuine. "Chamomile with honey. It's what my grandmother always made when the world felt too heavy." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus found himself nodding. Elena disappeared and returned 10 minutes later with a small tray containing a steaming mug, a few cookies wrapped in napkins, and a small vase with a single white flower. "Where did you find a flower at midnight?" Marcus asked, accepting the tray. "The hotel has a small garden in the back. The night-blooming jasmine just opened today. I thought it might brighten your room a little." Elena's voice held no expectation of gratitude or recognition, just the simple satisfaction of doing something kind. As Marcus sipped the tea, he felt the first genuine warmth he had experienced in days. "This is perfect. Thank you." "You're welcome." Elena moved efficiently around the room, straightening the already neat space, replacing towels, checking that the air conditioning was set properly. "Are you visiting Seattle for business?" It was a casual question. The kind hotel staff probably asked guests all the time. But for Marcus, it felt like the first normal human interaction he'd had in months. No agenda, no hidden motives, just genuine curiosity about another person. "Something like that," Marcus replied. "Had some difficulties today." "Sometimes you need to step away from your life for a while." Elena nodded knowingly as she arranged fresh amenities in the bathroom. "I understand that feeling. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when we least expect them, but I've found that sometimes the detours lead us exactly where we need to be." "You sound like you speak from experience." Elena emerged from the bathroom, her expression thoughtful. "I've had my share of unexpected turns. Lost my job at a big hotel chain 2 years ago when they downsized. Thought it was the end of the world. But it led me here, to this place where I actually get to know the guests, where the work feels more personal, more meaningful." Marcus was struck by her perspective. Here was someone who had faced professional setback but found a way to see it as redirection rather than failure. "Do you ever regret not working at the bigger hotels anymore?" "The pay, the prestige." Elena paused in her work, considering the question seriously. "I make enough to support my daughter and myself. And at the end of each day, I know I've made someone stay a little better. That's worth more than a fancy uniform or a corporate title." The simplicity and authenticity of her answer hit Marcus like a revelation. Here was someone who measured success not in dollars or status, but in human impact. When was the last time he had considered whether his work made anyone's life better? "Your daughter is lucky to have you," Marcus said, and meant it. Elena's face lit up. "Sophia is 8. She wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up. Says she's going to save the whales and discover new species of fish. Last week, she convinced me to let her set up a lemonade stand, not to make money, but to raise funds for ocean conservation." The pride and love in Elena's voice was unmistakable. Marcus found himself smiling for the first time all day. "She sounds like she has her mother's heart for helping others." "She has bigger dreams than I ever did," Elena said, finishing her tasks. "And I'm going to make sure she has every opportunity to chase them." As Elena prepared to leave, Marcus felt an unexpected reluctance to see her go. Her presence had somehow made the lonely hotel room feel less empty, less like a place to hide, and more like a place to heal. "Thank you," he said, meaning far more than just the tea and the flower. "I didn't realize how much I needed someone to show kindness to a stranger tonight." Elena paused at the door, her expression gentle, but serious. We're all strangers until someone decides to see us as human. Whatever brought you here tonight, Mr. Park, I hope tomorrow looks brighter." After she left, Marcus sat in the quiet room, sipping the chamomile tea and looking at the small white flower. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen by another person. Not as a billionaire, not as a business leader, not as a public figure, but simply as a human being who was hurting and needed comfort. The betrayal that had driven him from his penthouse still stung, but Elena's kindness had shown him something he had forgotten existed. Genuine human connection, offered without expectation or agenda. As he prepared for bed in the modest hotel room, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He would extend his stay. The next morning, Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through thin curtains rather than the filtered, climate-controlled lighting of his penthouse. The difference was more than aesthetic. Something about the natural light, the sounds of regular people starting their days outside his window, felt grounding in a way his isolated luxury never had. He showered in the compact bathroom, noticing how different it felt from his marble and gold ensuite. Everything was simple, functional, honest. As he dressed in the casual clothes he had hastily packed, Marcus realized he couldn't remember the last time he had put on jeans and a regular cotton shirt instead of a handmade suit. The continental breakfast was served in a small dining area adjacent to the lobby. Marcus filled a plate with eggs, toast, and fruit, then looked around for a place to sit. The room was half full of families, business travelers, and what appeared to be a group of college students on some kind of road trip. "Mr. Park!" a bright voice called out. Marcus turned to see Elena approaching with a coffee pot, wearing a different uniform shirt but the same warm smile. "How did you sleep? I hope the tea helped." "Much better than I expected," Marcus replied, surprised by how glad he was to see her. "You work days too?" "I pick up extra shifts when I can. Sophia's at summer camp this week, so I'm covering for a colleague whose mother is in the hospital." Elena refilled his coffee cup without being asked. "Are you checking out today?" Marcus had planned to return to his regular life, to face the aftermath of David's betrayal, and get back to the business of being a billionaire. But looking at Elena's genuine interest in his well-being, he found himself changing his mind again. "Actually, I think I'll stay another night or two, if the room is available." "Of course," Elena said, her smile widening. "I'm glad you're not rushing back to whatever difficulties brought you here. Sometimes we need more than one night to find our footing again." As she moved on to serve other guests, Marcus watched her interactions with each person. She remembered the elderly gentleman liked his coffee black and strong. She asked the young mother about her teething baby. She listened patiently as one of the college students complained about their broken-down van, then suggested a reliable mechanic nearby. Elena treated each person as if they mattered, as if their concerns and comfort were personally important to her. Marcus realized he was witnessing something he had read about but never truly understood. Genuine hospitality. Not the scripted transactional service of luxury hotels where his money bought attention, but authentic care for another person's well-being. After breakfast, Marcus found himself with an unusual problem. Nothing to do and nowhere to be. His executive assistant was handling the media inquiries about the failed takeover. His legal team was managing the aftermath with Meridian Corp. His board of directors expected him to take a few days to regroup before their next meeting. For the first time in decades, Marcus Chen had time to think, to breathe, to simply exist without an agenda. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. Who was he when he wasn't being a CEO, a decision-maker, a leader? What did Marcus Chen the person, rather than Marcus Chen the brand, actually want from life? He decided to take a walk around the neighborhood surrounding the Harbor Inn. It was a working-class area with small businesses, family homes, and tree-lined streets that spoke of community rather than commerce. Marcus found himself in a small park where parents pushed children on swings and teenagers played pickup basketball. Sitting on a bench, watching the simple scenes of daily life unfold around him, Marcus felt a peace that had eluded him for years. No one here knew who he was. No one wanted anything from him. He was just another person in the world, free to observe and reflect, without the weight of expectations and responsibilities. His phone, which he had reluctantly turned back on, buzzed with notifications. Emails from reporters, text messages from board members, missed calls from his publicist. The digital tether to his high-stakes life felt suddenly heavy and intrusive. Marcus turned the phone off again and decided to extend his disappearance a little longer. That evening, he was reading in his room when Elena knocked again during her night shift. This time, she carried a small plate covered with aluminum foil. "I hope you don't mind," she said, seeming slightly embarrassed. "I made too much dinner and thought you might enjoy some homemade food instead of hotel breakfast leftovers." Under the foil, Marcus found rice and beans with perfectly seasoned chicken, along with a small container of what looked like flan for dessert. The aroma alone made his mouth water. "This smells incredible," Marcus said, genuinely moved by the gesture. "But I can't accept this. You must have made it for yourself and your daughter. Sophia's still at camp, and I told you, I made too much." Elena's tone was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were kind. "Besides, everyone deserves a proper meal when they're going through a difficult time. Room service sandwiches aren't exactly comfort food." As Marcus tasted the first bite, he was transported. The food was simple but perfect, seasoned with care and made with obvious skill. "This is extraordinary. Where did you learn to cook like this?" Elena's face brightened with pride. "My grandmother taught me. She always said food is love made visible, that you can tell how much someone cares by the attention they put into feeding you." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. Elena's voice carried the weight of old grief, but also gratitude. "She worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, but she never missed a school play or a parent-teacher conference. She showed me that being rich has nothing to do with money and everything to do with how much love you have to give." Marcus paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. Elena's words hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time he had felt truly wealthy in the way she described? When had he last given love freely, without calculation or expectation of return? "She sounds like an amazing woman. Is she still?" Marcus trailed off, unsure how to finish the question tactfully. "She passed 5 years ago," Elena said softly, "but I try to live by her example every day. Treat people with kindness. Work hard. And remember that we're all fighting battles others can't see." They talked for another hour. As Marcus finished the meal, Elena told him about Sophia's dreams of marine biology, about the books they read together, about the small adventures they planned for after summer camp ended. Marcus found himself sharing stories, too, carefully edited versions of his childhood, his parents, sacrifices to give him opportunities, his early struggles building his company. What struck him most was how Elena listened, not the polite, distracted listening he was accustomed to from people waiting for their turn to ask him for something, but genuine attention. She asked thoughtful questions, laughed at his stories, and seemed truly interested in understanding who he was beneath the surface. When Elena finally left to complete her rounds, Marcus sat in the quiet room, feeling more connected to another human being than he had in years. The simple act of sharing a meal and honest conversation had reminded him of something essential about what it meant to be human. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus realized he hadn't thought about David's betrayal, the failed takeover, or the pressures of his business empire in hours. Instead, his mind was full of Elena's laughter, her wisdom about love and kindness, and the growing recognition that this unexpected detour might be exactly what he needed to find his way back to himself. Marcus extended his stay at the Harbor Inn for a 3rd day, then a 4th. Each morning brought a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years, not for board meetings or merger negotiations, but for simple human interactions that had become the highlight of his carefully constructed life. On his 5th morning, Marcus discovered Elena in the hotel's small back garden, tending to a collection of plants that seemed far too elaborate for a modest establishment. She was kneeling beside a raised bed of herbs, her hands gentle as she pruned basil and oregano. "I didn't know the hotel had such an extensive garden," Marcus said, approaching with his morning coffee. Elena looked up, her face lighting up with the enthusiasm he had come to treasure. "Technically, it doesn't. I asked Mr. Patterson, the manager, if I could start this 3 months ago. The previous owner had let everything go to weeds, but the soil was still good." Marcus surveyed the impressive transformation. What had clearly once been a neglected patch of earth was now a thriving garden, with vegetables, herbs, and flowers arranged in careful rows. You did all this yourself? Sophia helped when she wasn't at school. We planted everything from seeds. Elena stood, brushing dirt from her knees. I use the herbs for cooking, and the vegetables go to families in the neighborhood who could use fresh food. The flowers brighten the guest rooms. The simple elegance of her system struck Marcus profoundly. Here was someone who had taken an abandoned space and created something that fed people, brought beauty to others, and gave her own daughter lessons in nurturing and responsibility. It was entrepreneurship in its purest form, motivated not by profit, but by the desire to contribute something meaningful to the world. "This is incredible," Marcus said, kneeling to examine a thriving tomato plant. "How did you learn to do this?" "Trial and error, mostly. My grandmother had a small garden when I was growing up, but I didn't pay much attention then." Elena's voice carried a note of regret. "I wish I had asked her more questions when I had the chance. But YouTube University helped fill in the gaps." Marcus found himself thinking about his own missed opportunities to learn from his elders. His father had been a brilliant engineer who immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a belief in education. His mother had managed their family's finances with the precision of a Fortune 500 CFO, stretching every dollar to ensure Marcus had opportunities they never had. Yet in his rush toward success, he had rarely asked them about their dreams, their fears, their wisdom gained through struggle. "Your grandmother would be proud of what you've created here," Marcus said, meaning every word. "I hope so. She always said that if you're going to be somewhere, make it better than you found it." Elena moved to water a section of lettuce. "I figured if I'm going to be working here anyway, why not create something that helps people?" The philosophy was so simple yet so profound. Marcus thought about his own massive corporation, the buildings he had constructed, the technology he had developed. How much of it actually made people's lives better versus simply generating wealth? The question made him uncomfortable. "Elena, can I ask you something?" Marcus hesitated, uncertain how to phrase what he was thinking. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you had unlimited resources? If money was never a concern?" Elena paused in her watering, considering the question seriously. "I used to, especially right after Sophia was born and her father decided he wasn't ready for the responsibility. I would lie awake wondering how different things could be if I had inherited wealth or won the lottery." "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That happiness isn't about having unlimited resources. It's about finding meaning in whatever resources you have." Elena set down the watering can and faced him directly. "I've cleaned hotel rooms for wealthy guests who seemed miserable despite having everything money could buy. And I've met families in this neighborhood who have very little but are genuinely content because they have love, purpose, and community." Her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here he was, a man with unlimited resources by any reasonable measure, and he had been profoundly unhappy for years without even realizing it. The betrayal by David had simply exposed a hollowness that had been growing for a long time. "But surely," Marcus pressed, "you must dream of financial security for Sophia, of not having to work multiple jobs, of having options you don't have now." Elena smiled, but it was tinged with something deeper than happiness. "Of course I want security for my daughter. I want her to have choices I never had. But I also want her to understand that wealth without character is worthless. That success without compassion is ultimately empty." She gestured toward the garden around them. "Every morning, Sophia and I would come out here before school. She'd help me water the plants, and we'd talk about how everything grows better when it's cared for consistently, patiently. I want her to learn that the most valuable things in life require nurturing, not just acquisition." Marcus found himself profoundly moved by Elena's approach to parenting. His own parents had sacrificed enormously to give him opportunities. But somewhere along the way, he had confused success with fulfillment, achievement with happiness. Elena was raising her daughter to understand the difference. "She's lucky to have you as a mother," Marcus said quietly. "I'm lucky to have her as a daughter. She teaches me as much as I teach her." Elena picked up a small basket and began harvesting vegetables for that evening's dinner preparation. "She reminds me to see wonder in small things, to ask questions about everything, to believe that we can make a difference even when we're just one person." That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of returning to his room to handle business calls and emails, he asked Elena if he could help with the garden work. She looked skeptical at first, noting his expensive clothes and manicured hands. "I don't want you to ruin your outfit," she said diplomatically. "These are just clothes," Marcus replied, rolling up the sleeves of his designer shirt. "And honestly, I can't remember the last time I did anything with my hands that wasn't typing on a keyboard or signing documents." Elena handed him a small shovel and showed him how to weed around the pepper plants without disturbing their roots. The work was harder than Marcus had expected. The sun was warm on his back, dirt accumulated under his fingernails, and his muscles, accustomed to nothing more strenuous than a gym workout, began to ache. But there was something profoundly satisfying about the physical labor. Each weed he removed made space for the vegetables to grow. Each plant he watered would eventually feed someone. The work had an immediate, tangible purpose that his usual business dealings often lacked. "You're a natural," Elena said, watching him carefully thin a row of carrots. "Are you sure you haven't done this before?" "Never. But there's something meditative about it." Marcus paused, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "In my regular life, everything is abstract. Numbers on screens, reports about market trends, strategies that might pay off months or years in the future. This is immediate. Real." Elena nodded knowingly. "That's exactly what I love about it. You plant a seed, you care for it consistently, and you get to see the results of your efforts. No middle managers, no bureaucracy, just cause and effect." As they worked side by side, Elena told Marcus about her plans to expand the garden next year. She wanted to add a composting system to reduce the hotel's waste, and she had ideas for a small greenhouse that could extend the growing season. Her enthusiasm was infectious, her vision clear and practical. "Have you talked to the hotel manager about funding for these expansions?" Marcus asked. Elena laughed, but not unkindly. "Mr. Park, this is a small hotel with tight margins. Mr. Patterson was generous to let me start this garden at all. The expanded plans are dreams, not realistic possibilities." Marcus found himself thinking about the resources sitting unused in his various accounts, about the money he spent without thought on things that brought him no real satisfaction. The amount Elena needed for her garden expansions would be less than he typically spent on a single business lunch. What if someone wanted to help fund the expansion anonymously? Marcus asked carefully. Not charity, but an investment in something that clearly benefits the community? Elena stopped weeding and looked at him directly. "That's very kind, Mr. Park, but I couldn't accept something like that. I've learned to be suspicious of anonymous benefactors. They usually want something in return, even if they don't say so up front." Her wariness stung because Marcus realized it was probably justified. How many times had he used charitable donations or community investments as tax strategies or public relations moves rather than genuine attempts to help? Elena's skepticism was the result of experience with people like him, people who had turned generosity into another form of transaction. What if the person genuinely wanted nothing in return except to see the garden grow? Marcus pressed gently. "Then they would be very rare indeed," Elena replied, returning to her work. "But I prefer to build things through my own efforts, even if it takes longer. That way I know the foundation is solid." The conversation stayed with Marcus through the rest of the afternoon. As evening approached, he found himself reluctant to go back to his room, to return to the isolation and electronic demands of his regular existence. Instead, he lingered in the garden, helping Elena harvest vegetables for dinner, and listening to her stories about the neighborhood families who would benefit from the fresh produce. "There's Mrs. Chen, who's 86 and lives alone," Elena explained as she selected tomatoes. "She taught me how to make the best dumplings in the world in exchange for fresh vegetables. And the Martinez family just had their third child, so money's tight, but they're too proud to ask for help directly." Marcus noticed how Elena knew not just the names of the people she helped, but their circumstances, their dignity, their specific needs. She had created an informal support network that operated on respect and mutual care rather than pity or obligation. "How do you know so much about everyone in the neighborhood?" Marcus asked. "You learn things when you pay attention and show up consistently. Mrs. Chen tells me about her grandchildren in California. Maria Martinez and I trade childcare when one of us has to work extra shifts. Mr. Patel at the corner store saves day-old bread for the garden's compost bin. Elena's face glowed with genuine affection for her community. We all help each other in different ways. Marcus realized he couldn't name a single neighbor from his exclusive residential area. His penthouse was surrounded by other wealthy people, but he interacted with none of them beyond polite nods in the elevator. He had money and status, but no community, no real connections with the people who shared his physical space. That evening, Elena brought him dinner again, this time accompanied by fresh bread and vegetables from the garden. As they shared the meal, Marcus found himself asking questions he had never thought to ask anyone. "What makes you happy?" he inquired, genuinely curious. Elena paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "That's a big question. Small things, mostly." Sophia's laugh when she discovers something new. The first tomato ripening in the garden. Helping a guest solve a problem they thought was impossible. Knowing that at the end of each day I've made someone's life a little easier. "Those are all things you do for other people," Marcus observed. "I suppose they are, but that's what makes me feel most alive, most purposeful." Elena studied his face. "What about you, Mr. Park? What makes you truly happy?" The question should have been simple, but Marcus found himself struggling to answer. When was the last time he had felt genuine happiness rather than satisfaction at achieving a goal or winning a competition? When had he last experienced joy that wasn't tied to acquisition or accomplishment? "I used to love building things," he said finally. "Not just businesses, but actually creating something that didn't exist before. Solving problems through innovation. I think I lost touch with that somewhere along the way." "It's never too late to find your way back to what matters," Elena said gently. "Sometimes we just need to get quiet enough to remember who we were before the world told us who we should be." After Elena left to complete her rounds, Marcus sat in the quiet hotel room and made a series of phone calls that would have shocked anyone who knew him professionally. He instructed his assistant to clear his calendar for the following week. He asked his legal team to handle all communications with the media regarding the attempted takeover. He told his board of directors that he was taking a brief sabbatical to reassess strategic priorities. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Chen was choosing to step away from the relentless pursuit of more wealth, more power, more recognition, in favor of something he couldn't yet fully name but desperately wanted to understand. As he prepared for bed, Marcus looked out the window at the small garden below, barely visible in the moonlight. Tomorrow, he would continue learning about cultivation, patience, and the satisfaction of nurturing something greater than himself. He would continue discovering what it felt like to be valued, not for what he could provide, but for who he chose to be in small, consistent moments of human connection. The betrayal that had driven him to this place seemed less like a catastrophe now, and more like a course correction. David Kim had been wrong about many things, but perhaps he had been right about one. Marcus had lost touch with his authentic self. The difference was that Elena was helping him find his way back, not through judgment or confrontation, but through the radical act of seeing him as worthy of care exactly as he was. For the first time in months, Marcus fell asleep without the anxiety that usually plagued his nights. Instead, he dreamed of growing things, of hands in the soil, of simple meals shared with someone who had somehow become essential to his rediscovery of what it meant to be fully human. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge that would test everything Marcus thought he had learned about authenticity and connection. As he made his way to the hotel's breakfast area, he nearly collided with a familiar figure emerging from the elevator. "Marcus Chen," a sharp voice called out. "I thought that was your car in the parking lot." Marcus turned to see Jessica Wu, a technology journalist who had covered his company for years and had an uncanny ability to appear wherever news was breaking. His heart sank as he realized his carefully maintained anonymity was about to be shattered. "Jessica," he said, attempting to sound casual, "what brings you to this part of town?" "Following up on rumors about your disappearance after the Meridian takeover attempt," she replied with a knowing smile. "My sources said you haven't been seen at your office or penthouse for days. Imagine my surprise to find you hiding out at a budget hotel under an assumed name." Marcus felt the walls of his temporary sanctuary closing in around him. Within hours, his presence at the Harbor Inn would be headlines. Elena would discover that Michael Park, the troubled businessman she had shown such kindness to, was actually Marcus Chen, the billionaire CEO whose picture regularly appeared in business magazines. The thought of Elena's reaction, the disappointment, the sense of betrayal, the realization that he had deceived her, made Marcus feel physically ill. For the first time, he had found someone who saw him as simply human, and he was about to lose that precious connection to his public identity. "I'm not hiding," Marcus said, though even he could hear how unconvincing the words sounded. "I'm just taking some time to think." Jessica's expression shifted from predatory to genuinely curious. "Marcus, you look different, more relaxed than I've seen you in years. Whatever you're doing here seems to be working." Before Marcus could respond, Elena appeared from the breakfast area, carrying a coffee pot and wearing her usual warm smile. She approached their small group without hesitation. "Good morning, Mr. Park," she said cheerfully. "Would you and your friend like some coffee?" The moment hung suspended in time. Marcus watched Jessica's eyes widen as she connected the dots. The fake name, the modest hotel, the obvious familiarity between Marcus and the housekeeper. He could practically see the story writing itself in her mind. Billionaire CEO's secret life, the hotel maid who captured his heart. "Actually," Marcus said, making a decision that surprised even him, "I'd like you both to join me for breakfast. There's something I need to explain." 20 minutes later, the three of them sat in a quiet corner of the breakfast area, the morning rush having subsided to leave them with relative privacy. Marcus had spent the time gathering courage for a conversation that could destroy the most meaningful connection he had made in years. "Elena," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest, "I haven't been entirely honest with you about who I am." Elena set down her coffee cup, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "What do you mean?" Jessica leaned forward, her journalist instincts fully engaged, but Marcus held up a hand. "Please, let me explain this properly." He took a deep breath and looked directly at Elena. "My real name is Marcus Chen. I'm the CEO of Chen Technologies, and I'm worth considerably more than someone staying at a budget hotel should be." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, hurt, and something that looked dangerously close to betrayal. Marcus watched as she processed not just his identity, but the implications of his deception. "You're Marcus Chen," Elena said slowly. "The Marcus Chen whose picture is on the business magazines in the lobby magazine rack. Yes. The Marcus Chen who could buy this entire hotel chain without thinking twice about the expense." "Probably, yes." Elena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me, I need a moment." She walked quickly toward the kitchen, leaving Marcus alone with Jessica, who was watching the drama unfold with obvious fascination. "Well," Jessica said, pulling out her phone, "this is quite a story. Billionaire CEO goes undercover, falls for the hotel maid. It's like a modern fairy tale." "Don't," Marcus said sharply, "don't turn this into a story." "Marcus, this is exactly the kind of human interest piece that would rehabilitate your image after the takeover attempt. Elena seems lovely, and the optics of you connecting with working-class values. Stop." Marcus's voice carried the authority that had commanded boardrooms for decades. "Elena isn't a publicity opportunity. She's not a story angle or an image rehabilitation strategy. She's a person who showed kindness to someone she thought needed it, and I deceived her." Jessica studied his face with new interest. "You really care about her." "More than I realized until this moment." Marcus stood up. "Jessica, I'm asking you as someone who's covered my company fairly for years. Give me time to handle this properly before you write anything." "How much time?" 24 hours. If you're going to write the story anyway, at least let me try to explain things to Elena first." Jessica considered this, then nodded. 24 hours. But Marcus, this conversation never happened if you try to spin this later. After Jessica left, Marcus found Elena in the hotel's small office behind the front desk, staring at a computer screen that displayed his company's website. His professional headshot smiled back at them from the executive leadership page. $47 billion, Elena said without looking up. "That's your estimated net worth according to this article from last month." Marcus sat down in the chair across from her desk. "Elena, I know this looks bad." "Looks bad?" Elena finally turned to face him, and he could see the hurt in her eyes. "Marcus, I spent hours talking to you about struggling to make ends meet. about working multiple jobs, about wanting financial security for my daughter. And you sat there, worth more money than I could spend in 100 lifetimes, pretending to relate to my problems. I wasn't pretending to relate. I was trying to understand what it felt like to be valued for something other than my bank account. Marcus leaned forward. Elena, everything I told you about feeling isolated, about questioning what really matters in life, all of that was true. But you lied about who you are. I used a fake name, yes, but everything else, every conversation we had, every moment we shared, that was the real me. Maybe the most real I've been in years. Elena shook her head. Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel right now? I brought you homemade food because I thought you were a struggling businessman who needed kindness. I shared stories about my grandmother, about Sophia's dreams, about our financial struggles, and you were probably laughing at how naive I was. The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. I would never laugh at you. Elena, your stories, your wisdom, your perspective on life, they've changed me more in 1 week than anything has in the last decade. Changed you how? Elena's voice was skeptical, hurt. Are you going to tell me that a billionaire CEO learned something profound from a hotel housekeeper? Is that supposed to make me feel better about being deceived? Marcus realized that everything he might say would sound patronizing or false, that his wealth and status had created a chasm between them that no amount of sincerity could easily bridge, but he had to try. 5 days ago, I was betrayed by my business partner, someone I considered my closest friend. I came here to hide, to feel sorry for myself, to figure out how to get back to my regular life of making money and accumulating power. Marcus's voice grew quieter. Then I met you, and you showed me what it looked like to find meaning in service, to create value through caring for others, to measure success by impact rather than income. Elena remained silent, so Marcus continued. You built that garden to feed people. You remember every guest's preferences because you genuinely care about their comfort. You're raising your daughter to understand that wealth has nothing to do with money and everything to do with love. You live principles I had forgotten I ever believed in. So I was your inspiration? Your reminder of what it means to be a good person? Elena's tone was bitter. How convenient for you to have a real person to learn authenticity from. Marcus felt the conversation slipping away from him. Felt Elena retreating behind walls he might never be able to scale again. It wasn't like that. You weren't a project or a lesson. You were. You were the first person in years to see me as just a person. Not as a CEO, not as a wealthy man, just as someone who might need kindness. But that person doesn't really exist, does he? Elena stood up and moved to the window that looked out onto her garden. Michael Park, the man I cared about, was just a character you created. The real you lives in a world I can't even imagine. The real me is sitting right here, trying to explain that I've never felt more like myself than I have this past week. Marcus stood as well, desperate to make her understand. Yes, I have money. Yes, I run a corporation. But Elena, those things don't define who I am any more than your job title defines you. Elena turned back to face him. My job title is exactly who I am. I'm a single mother working multiple jobs to build a better life for her daughter. I can't afford to pretend to be someone else, even for a week. The truth of her statement hung between them. Marcus realized that his ability to assume a false identity, to take a sabbatical from his responsibilities, was itself a privilege that Elena could never afford. His deception wasn't just about a fake name, it was about the fundamental difference between their realities. You're right, Marcus said quietly. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. They stood in silence for several minutes. Finally, Elena spoke. What happens now? You go back to your penthouse and your billions, and I go back to cleaning hotel rooms? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I know I don't want to lose what we found together. What did we find, Marcus? Elena's voice was tired. I found someone I thought understood my world. You found someone who reminded you of values you'd forgotten. Those aren't the same thing. Before Marcus could respond, a young voice called out from the hotel lobby. Mama, I'm back from camp. Elena's face immediately brightened, and Marcus watched her transformation from hurt woman to devoted mother happen in an instant. Sophia's here. Camp ended early today. A small girl with Elena's dark hair and intelligent eyes burst into the office, dropping a backpack and throwing herself into her mother's arms. "I missed you so much, and guess what? We saw dolphins yesterday and I learned their names in Spanish." "I missed you too, sweetheart." Elena hugged her daughter tightly, then seemed to remember Marcus's presence. "Sophia, I'd like you to meet Mr." She hesitated, unsure which name to use. "Mr. Chen?" Marcus said, extending his hand to the little girl. "You can call me Marcus." Sophia shook his hand solemnly, then looked between her mother and Marcus with the perceptive gaze that only children possess. "Are you the nice man who helped Mama with the garden?" Marcus glanced at Elena, who looked surprised. "You told her about me?" "She tells me about everyone she meets," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "She said you were learning about growing things and that you seemed sad but were getting happier." The innocent summary of his week at the hotel struck Marcus profoundly. Through a child's eyes, his story wasn't about deception or class differences. It was simply about someone learning and healing through connection with others. "Your mother is an excellent teacher," Marcus told Sophia. "She taught me a lot about what's important in life." Sophia beamed with pride. "She's the smartest person I know. She can fix anything and grow anything and cook anything." She turned to her mother. "Can Marcus stay for dinner? I want to show him my project about whale migration." Elena looked uncomfortable. "Sweetie, Mr. Chen probably has to get back to his regular life now." "Actually," Marcus said, making another impulsive decision, "I'd love to see your whale project, Sophia. If your mother doesn't mind." Elena studied his face, clearly torn between protecting her daughter from further complications and recognizing her child's genuine excitement about sharing her work. "Please, Mama." Sophia added her persuasive power to the request. "I practiced my presentation for the whole bus ride home." "All right," Elena said finally. "But just for dinner." That evening, in Elena's small apartment above a neighborhood bakery, Marcus experienced something he had never encountered in his adult life: a normal family dinner. The apartment was tiny but immaculate, decorated with Sophia's artwork and filled with books. The smell of Elena's cooking filled the space with warmth and comfort. Sophia's whale migration project was elaborate and passionate, complete with hand-drawn maps, research about ocean temperatures, and theories about how climate change was affecting migration patterns. She presented it with the enthusiasm of someone who had found her calling. "This is remarkable," Marcus said, genuinely impressed by the depth of her research. "How did you learn all this?" "Library books mostly, and some websites at school," Sophia replied. "But I really want to see whales in person someday. Maybe even swim with them, if they're not too busy." Marcus found himself thinking about the resources at his disposal: the private jets that could take Sophia anywhere in the world, the connections he had with marine research organizations, the ability to turn her dreams into reality with a single phone call. But he also remembered Elena's earlier words about suspicious anonymous benefactors and her pride in building things through her own efforts. "Where would you most like to see whales?" he asked instead. "Alaska. Or maybe Hawaii. Mama says we'll take a trip someday when we save enough money." Sophia's matter-of-fact acceptance of financial limitations struck Marcus as both heartbreaking and admirable. After dinner, as Sophia worked on homework in her room, Marcus helped Elena clean up in the small kitchen. They worked in silence for several minutes before Elena spoke. "She doesn't know who you are, and I'd like to keep it that way." "Of course," Marcus agreed immediately. "Elena, I know trust is probably impossible right now, but I need you to know. Meeting you and Sophia has been the most important thing that's happened to me in years." Elena dried a plate carefully before responding. "Marcus, I can see that you're sincere. I can see that this week meant something to you. But you have to understand, your world and mine don't actually intersect. This was a temporary detour for you, but it's my real life." "What if it doesn't have to be temporary?" Elena turned to face him fully. "What are you suggesting?" Marcus realized he didn't have an answer that made sense. Was he suggesting that he continue to pretend to be someone else? That Elena somehow join his world of wealth and privilege? That he abandon his responsibilities and live a simpler life? None of these options seemed realistic or fair to either of them. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know that I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you." "Then don't," Elena said simply. "Go back to your life, but take what you learned here with you. Build something that matters. Use your resources to help people. Remember that success isn't just about accumulation." Marcus nodded, understanding that Elena was giving him the most generous gift possible: forgiveness and guidance, even after his deception. "And us?" he asked quietly. Elena's expression was sad but resolute. "There is no us, Marcus. There's you, learning to be a better person. And there's me, continuing to build the life I want for my daughter. Those are two separate stories." Later that evening, as Marcus prepared to leave Elena's apartment, Sophia appeared in the hallway wearing pajamas covered with cartoon whales. "Are you leaving tomorrow?" she asked. "I think so," Marcus replied gently. "Will you remember about the whales? About how they travel thousands of miles but always know how to find their way home?" Marcus knelt down to Sophia's eye level. "I'll remember everything you taught me tonight." Sophia hugged him impulsively. "I hope you find your way home too, Marcus." The simple wisdom of an 8-year-old nearly undid him. As Marcus drove back to the Harbor Inn for his final night, Sophia's words echoed in his mind. For the first time, he began to understand that home wasn't a place or even a person. It was a sense of alignment between who you are and how you live. The next morning, Marcus checked out of the Harbor Inn. Elena was nowhere to be seen, and he suspected she had deliberately arranged her schedule to avoid a final goodbye. He left an envelope at the front desk with her name on it, containing not money or a grand gesture, but simply a letter expressing his gratitude for her kindness and his commitment to living differently because of what she had taught him. As he drove back toward the city and his penthouse, Marcus felt the weight of returning to his old life. But something fundamental had shifted. The betrayal that had driven him away no longer seemed like the most important event in his recent history. Instead, it was the reminder that authentic relationships, like the one he had briefly shared with Elena, were worth more than all the business partnerships and strategic alliances he had spent years cultivating. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the community room of the Chen Foundation's newest project, a combination library, computer lab, and urban agriculture center in Elena's neighborhood. The space was filled with children working on homework, adults attending job training classes, and families learning to grow their own food in hydroponic gardens. Elena was there too, having accepted the position of Community Programs Director after initially declining twice. She had only agreed when Marcus proved that the foundation operated independently of his direct involvement, with a board of community leaders making all programming decisions. "The tomatoes are coming along nicely," Elena said, joining Marcus near the hydroponic display where Sophia was explaining plant nutrition to a group of younger children. "Your design was perfect," Marcus replied. "This program is going to be replicated in 12 cities next year." They stood watching Sophia's animated teaching, both proud of how the little girl had blossomed in her role as junior environmental educator. "She still wants to swim with whales," Elena mentioned casually. "First know a marine biologist in Hawaii who runs ethical whale watching tours," Marcus said carefully. "Not a gift, just information, if you're ever planning a trip." Elena smiled, the first fully warm smile she had given him since the morning his identity was revealed. "We might be planning a trip. The foundation's salary includes professional development travel, and Sophia's teacher thinks she'd benefit from field research experience." Marcus felt a flutter of hope in his chest. Over the past months, he and Elena had rebuilt something that wasn't quite friendship but was no longer marked by hurt and deception. They had found a way to work together on projects that mattered to both of them, maintaining appropriate boundaries while acknowledging the connection that had changed both their lives. "Marcus," Elena said as the evening program began to wind down, "I want you to know what happened at the hotel, the way it started. That wasn't your fault entirely. You were honest about the parts of yourself that mattered most." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Elena, I deceived you about fundamental facts of my life. You used a fake name and hid your wealth. But you didn't fake your loneliness, your search for meaning, your capacity for kindness." Elena's voice was thoughtful. "I've spent months thinking about this. The person I cared about. He was real. He just happened to have more money than I knew about. Does that change how you see what happened between us? Elena considered the question carefully. It changes the story, but not the truth of the feelings. You needed someone to see you as human, and I needed to be reminded that kindness can come from unexpected places. We gave each other exactly what we needed, even if we couldn't build something lasting from it. As families began to gather their children and pack up for the evening, Marcus found himself standing next to Sophia, who was carefully returning the plants to their proper positions in the hydroponic system. "Sophia," he said, "I have something to tell you." She looked up at him with curious eyes. "What is it?" "I never forgot about the whales. About how they travel thousands of miles, but always know how to find their way home." Sophia's face lit up with understanding beyond her years. "Did you find your way home, Marcus?" Marcus looked around the community center, at the children learning and growing, at Elena organizing materials with quiet satisfaction, at the tangible evidence of resources used to create opportunity rather than accumulate wealth. "I think I'm still traveling," he told Sophia honestly, "but I'm heading in the right direction now." As the evening ended and people began to leave, Marcus realized that Elena had been wrong about one thing. They had built something lasting together. Not a romantic relationship, but something more profound. Elena had helped him remember who he wanted to be, and he had created space for her talents to flourish on a larger scale. Their connection had evolved into a partnership that honored both their differences and their shared commitment to making the world better. Outside the community center, Elena paused before getting into her car. "Marcus, thank you for this place. For giving Sophia and me a chance to be part of something bigger. Thank you for showing me what home actually feels like," Marcus replied. "Even if I could only visit for a week." Elena smiled and drove away into the night. Marcus stood for a moment longer, looking up at the stars barely visible above the city lights. Somewhere out there, whales were navigating vast oceans by instincts older than human civilization, always finding their way home. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus understood that home wasn't a destination, but a practice. The daily choice to align your actions with your deepest values, to show up authentically for the people who matter, and to use whatever resources you have in service of something greater than yourself. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of his world now felt like a beginning. Elena Rodriguez, the housekeeper who had shown kindness to a stranger, had given him the greatest gift possible, the map to find his way back to his own heart. And in building a life worthy of that gift, Marcus had finally learned what it meant to be truly wealthy. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.